Oh, hi, everybody. My name is Matt Storrs, and welcome to Mattsplaining. On today's episode, I have an expert on who I'm very excited to speak with. Expert, please introduce yourself and tell us what you're an expert in.
Hi, I'm Shannon Malone de Benedictis. I am an Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker, mostly in wildlife filmmaking.
Fantastic. I feel like I know quite a bit about documentary filmmaking and especially wildlife filmmaking. And one of the things that people focus on when they first start getting into wildlife filmmaking is the origins of it. So you have the dark history of the lemmings going over the cliff, but there's a number of and every time these wildlife documentaries, what they don't talk about is what those animals get in their compensation package
Hmm.
after the filmmaking is done. Yes, there are some wildebeests and antelope or what have you that pass away or insect, the colony is disrupted and what have you. But in the ant situation, many of the ants, they get a bunch of peppermint candies. Actually, I guess they probably wouldn't want peppermint candies. They're yeah,
No,
that
not peppermint. No,
yeah,
no,
they don't like peppermint. Okay, so
no.
maybe that documentary was also somewhat unethical that I saw. But they'll get some degree of candies, some nerds or what have you. That's actually how they came up with the idea for Nerds Rope is they were giving out these candies to these ants and they were crawling over it in such a way and the people at Nerds were like, "Oh my God, that's such a good idea. We're so happy that we sponsored this wildlife documentary and gave them all these nerds. Let's start making nerds ropes." And then they were like, hey, why don't we cut it up? And that's how we have the nerds gummy clusters now. So that's a pretty amazing thing that came out of a wildlife documentary that not a lot of people know about. But also with like mammals and the easiest one that people focus on is actually aquatic. The to get sharks and other animals in the ocean, what they'll do is they'll chum the waters to get them to come out. And what a lot of people don't know is that after they do the initial chumming, they'll also throw in a whole fish or what have you, similar to how the people do the videos about the lobsters that they catch and they try to send them off with a whole, like a sardine or what have you. Similar thing, but they're throwing a chicken into the ocean for the shark to really enjoy it. Or in some of the less reputable wildlife documentaries, they might be throwing some of the people that were, let's just say, not as respectful of the initial fundraisers as they should have been.
And a production assistance. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the production assistants, the people that like they're like, hey, we can get rid of these folks. And then, we have a giant squid ripping those people apart. And unfortunately, they wish that they could show it, but for liability issues, they're not able to show that aspect of the documentary. But again, back to the land, you get these lions and tigers and other animals. They're getting salt licks at the very least. They're getting the chickens, as previously mentioned, and all of these other things, maybe a PA from time to time. And one of the other things that people don't think about is how often cameras are just left out in the wild. And there's so many cameras that have been one of the things, this is a sad things, but it is the truth. In many areas of the world, unfortunately, there are still landmines out in the world. And that is something that I feel that we should do a lot more to help clear the world of those remnant landmines in these countries. But another thing that more people don't talk about because it's significantly less dangerous, but there are a lot of wildlife filmmaking cameras that have been left in the wild that sometimes they're still connected, sometimes they're not, but they're still out there. And it's not the same as the horrific dynamic that could happen with a landmine. There are instances where you're walking through a trail and you come across one of these cameras, you don't realize it, and you trip on it. And a lot of, I think in 2024, the 13th most common injury for trail walkers and hikers was actually tripping over a wildlife documentary camera that had been forgotten in the woods.
Or a cameraman, but forgotten in the woods, just
Yeah,
abandoned.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
There many
yeah.
instances of a lot of that's why you see a lot of these cameramen with big scruffy beards. They know that there's a chance that they're going to get forgotten and they're going to have to subsist in the woods, in the wilderness for some time before they're able to get back.
Mm.
That's just planning ahead, so to speak, in their part. Now, based on what you've heard so far, about how much of that would you say was accurate?
The peppermint was obviously wrong
Yeah.
regarding the ants, but I fully believe the stat about people tripping over cameras because they're everywhere.
Hmm.
But I'd say maybe about 30 to 40, you know,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
You
Oh,
know? Yeah, there were some things that were out there, but it's not, animals are divas. They're difficult to work with. So that's dead on, absolutely dead on. And I'm thankful to say that I've never lost a PA during one of my shoots. So
congratulations.
thank
That's
you.
very good.
Thank you. But I'd say there's a good 30 to 40% that was accurate in there. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. I aim for that 30% as a sweet spot. So, yeah, tell me about wildlife filmmaking.
It's, I think, one of the big misperceptions about wildlife filmmaking is that the animals are just there.
Hmm.
And in fact, I was recently on a vacation on a Viking cruise, or as I like to call a nerd cruise. And there was someone complaining on the third day that they hadn't seen any whales or dolphins. And they're not just hanging out, guys. Their ocean's really big. And when it comes to filmmaking and profiling these animals, most filmmakers, almost all filmmakers, work with experts on the ground, scientists, conservationists, park rangers, etc., who are studying the behavior of the animals. And in collaboration with them, it increases our odds of being able to locate them. That is one really big perception. The animals don't give a shit about us. Let's just be honest. They live their own world in their own world and their own thing, and we're intruding on them. So we try to be as unobtrusive as possible. And that
Hmm.
is we're in pushing into their homes. So
Right.
we want to be respectful. And it's really one of the things that, to correct you on, it is very unethical to bait or lure animals. I'm not
I
saying
see.
filmmakers don't do that, but my teams don't do that. We don't do that. That said, there are opportunities to capture behavior that is something that works well for both. For example, in some locations, some Nordic countries, you're allowed to use roadkill and bring
Interesting.
roadkill to spaces that you know will be sustenance for animals like bears and wolves, etc. So that's not letting things go to waste. So that's a win for everybody. But in
May I ask a
oh
question?
please.
Yeah, so with the roadkill in these countries, do they have a repository of roadkill that you go and access? Or is it like, oh, hey, that deer got hit, okay, and there's an app that you can check ways or something like that where it's, oh, there is roadkill on the side of the road. Okay, we can grab that for our documentary film. But how would that work?
No, it's usually look, we know that there's a roadkill, or you ask around and you
I
say, hey,
see. Okay.
roadkill, and you find it, there's no app. And let me stress this. One of the reasons there's no app and there's no kind of thing is, in general, and I hate to be completely dissing my fellow humans, but humans can be really stupid when it comes to
Hmm.
working with wildlife and being around wildlife. One time I was at the Mendenhall Glacier, and a brown bear and her cubs were making their way on a path right near the glacier tourist center, because animals just like us are going to take the path of least resistance. If that's a road
Hmm.
or paved path, they're going to do it. And so the park rangers, the forest rangers, are pushing everybody's sides and give the bear room, give the bear room. And here comes this woman running right at the bear with her
Oh no.
iPad wanting to get a photo.
No.
Yeah. And
No.
every year you hear someone getting run over by a bison in Yellowstone or whatnot. And it's because, one, give them space, they're wild animals. Two, most wildlife filmmakers are using cameras with extremely long lenses and not getting close. Putting a repository or doing something, or putting this information out there, it's actually for everybody's protection, to make sure that the people who don't understand this is how the filmmaking works, they aren't harmed. I think I heard once that a scientist said that when you're in Yellowstone or you're in Yosemite or whatnot, they have the trash cans that have the clasp on them.
Hmm.
You know, they're quote bear proof. They said there's this fine line that they have to make it so it's bear proof, but also that humans can figure out how to open it. Just keep that in the back of your mind when it comes to wildlife filmmaking.
Okay, yeah, we're not too far off. Okay.
No, not too far off. But I think that's one thing of working with people on the ground, scientists, rangers, etc., in knowing where these animals are, and then working with incredibly talented people and photographers and whatnot who understand exactly what they can do, exactly what they can film, how close they can get, what's the best angle, and really putting the work into it. And some animals are very happy to be filmed. They're, what I mean, happy, that not to put a human emotion on them, but they're easier to capture. That's, you'll see a lot of those animals on wildlife filmmaking. There's a reason why there's lots of lions. There's a reason why there's lots of tigers and whatnot. You're never going to see a documentary about a Greenland shark because nobody can find them. It's
Mhm.
really hard to find them. So if there's an animal you've always been curious about, you've never seen a documentary about, it's usually because they're incredibly difficult to find. And more power to them. I agree with that. Good for them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you don't want to be on camera, don't be on camera.
No.
Absolutely. So what originally got you interested in wildlife filmmaking?
I have a degree in video art, so completely 180 opposite of what this what wildlife filmmaking it is. But I was always interested in telling stories, and
Mhm.
an opportunity came about working at Discovery Channel where they needed someone to come in on some wildlife films and help really shape the story. And whether you're telling a documentary or a fictional, you still have those narrative arcs. You still have
Right.
those points that you want to hit. Add in that I'm an incredible softie and emotional and find ways to cry. And in fact, we used to joke when I work with my company, Red Rock, the company I work with on Secrets of the Whales and Penguin Town, that if Shannon cries, it's successful. Look, we've made
Oh,
it work.
wow. That's
You know,
great.
here's the barometer. And so it is something that I think there's really fascinating stories out there, and I love learning. So telling these animal stories are great. I confess the animals I tend to be attracted to are probably more of your more unusual ones. I've probably worked on about 50, if not more, shark programs. One of my favorite ones I did was on a squirrel because squirrels are pretty resilient and funny, and built an obstacle course and had the Washington Nationals play-by-play commentators do the narration for it.
Oh, that's fantastic. That is inspired.
Yeah,
That's so great.
it's a way to have fun. How can
Yeah.
we have fun? And so I tend to gravitate more towards the fun animals and the ones that are gonna make you laugh. Not that sharks can't be funny. They're really not terribly funny. Still find the story. So that's how I ended up getting into documentary filmmaking.
Fantastic. So do you find that the narratives that you are building, you can go in with an idea of what the story might be, or is that something that you have to review the footage afterwards to piece it together?
It's a bit of both. I think the first thing that you do when you're structuring the story is in working with the scientists and experts and looking at the research is you find behavioral beat points that you know you want to profile. With, let's say, a bear, a grizzly bear, they come out of hibernation, there's mating, there is cub rearing, there's predation, then they go back into their den. So you have these kind of key points in their life. And so you start to build the narrative around what we know these points are. And when we send the crew out, we aim to capture those events. We aim to do that. But if something else happens, oh yeah, we don't say that's not part of the narrative. We will film it and we will incorporate that into the story. I remember that we were working on a shark show down in Australia, and the focus was on this. It was just on some unusual behavior by some great white sharks. And it turned out that we followed a lead while we were out there. We had our initial outline that we found a great white shark hotspot.
Oh,
And
wow.
its hotspot, not only was it, so that was one discovery, shifted our outline a little bit, but then we discovered that most of the great whites that were there were subadult. They were teenagers, young sharks, and they were hanging out together. And that was a complete revelation because it had always been believed that great white sharks were isolated alone. But what we found is at this age that there were, in fact, we tracked two who swam together everywhere.
Oh, wow.
So so you start with that initial outline, this initial beat point of like beats of this is how we want to tell the narrative, but then as things and as we observe and as we hope to capture things, we adjust as it goes. So it's a bit of both. It's but one thing you don't do if you want to be successful is and successful is not the right word. Let me correct myself. If you want to be cost efficient,
Okay.
because it's incredibly costly to send that camera person out there and just sit and wait because it takes time. to gather this footage. It doesn't happen immediately. So the joke of tripping over a cameraman who's just laying out there is there's a little bit of truth in that. Especially most of these people love going out there and just spending weeks upon weeks out there. But you have to have a plan. You can't just go film and hope to come up with something because one, won't know what you're going to get, and two, it'll never end. It just will
Absolutely.
never, ever end.
Absolutely. Shannon, this has been so insightful and wonderful. I've really enjoyed it. If people want to learn more about you and more about what you do, wildlife filmmaking and everything, where would you recommend that they go?
Sure. For wildlife filmmaking, there's excellent programs on most of the streamers. I highly recommend you check them out. My website is Padlin Creative, Padlin Creative. My company name is a hybrid of my mother's two names. And so I wanted to do something to dedicate her. And there's some clips
Wonderful.
up there and some of the work that I've done. There was one thing you said I want to make sure I do want
Yeah.
to talk about is you were talking about the abandoned trail cams for hikers tripping over them. I do recommend for hikers that if trail cams are left behind, that you don't hike naked because someone's going to have a record of that, of your naked body, and they might
Huh.
think you're Sasquatch or Bigfoot or a Yeti walking around. So always be careful of trail cams. Yeah, it'll
Okay.
capture everything.
That's good advice. That's very helpful, definitely. Uh, this has been so much fun. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. My name is Matt Storrs, and this has been Mattsplaining.